Hey, welcome to the cinematic flashbacks. Glad to be back again. Today we will talk about Liam Neeson's The Marksman. A young man named Miguel, Jacob Perez, is doing his schoolwork while his mom Rosa, Teresa Ruiz, finishes errands in kitchen. They live in Mexico. Somebody near her calls and cautions her that the cartel is after her, so she and Miguel need to promptly escape. The cartel chief Mauricio Guerrero, Juan Pablo Raba, has caught Rosa's sibling Carlos, Alfredo Quiroz, since he took cash from them, and he cautions Carlos that his family is next before they balance his body by a bridge. In Arizona, resigned previous Marine Jim Hansen, Liam Neeson, is working by the U.S. Mexico boundary to look out for undocumented transients endeavoring to cross. He recognizes a couple of close to him and reports it. As he follows, he sees that one is harmed and gives him water prior to calling somebody to bring clinical help. Jim's house is set up for abandonment, and he doesn't have many work choices. He lives alone with his canine Jackson, yet his nearest organization is his stepdaughter Sarah, Catherine Winnick, who is a cop. They are both missing her mom since she died, and Sarah brings Jim back home from the bar and takes care of him. At the point when Jim goes to the boundary the following day, he runs over Rosa and Miguel attempting to make it past the wall once Mauricio and his thugs make their presence mindful. Jim endeavors to report them to Boundary Watch, however Mauricio and two different men get out of their vehicle. In the wake of understanding that they are a danger, Jim attempts to have Rosa and Miguel stow away, so Mauricio's folks start shooting. Jim returns fire and hits Mauricio's sibling, killing him. He gets Rosa and Miguel in the truck and begins to drive away as Mauricio pursues the vehicle by walking. Jim shakes him off and moves away. Mauricio then, at that point, settles on a decision to fortifications. After they get sufficiently far, Miguel sees that Rosa was shot. Jim takes her out and lays her down as she is kicking the bucket. She provides Jim with a pack of taking cash and a location, mentioning to Jim that he take Miguel to family in Chicago. Jim then holds up as surgeons and different officials show up to recover Miguel. He is let by another official know that Miguel faults Jim for his mom's demise. At the point when Jim sees the cash in Rosa's sack, he feels a sense of urgency to return for the kid. He gains from somebody at the station that Miguel will be extradited and return with a relative, yet Jim likewise sees Mauricio and his men holding up in a van outside. Jim stunts the official at the front to allow him to see Miguel, and he carries the kid out of the station. Mauricio sees and follows. Jim gets back momentarily to get Jackson and his firearms prior to heading forward. Mauricio and his folks come to Jim's home to assemble individual data, and he likewise takes a marine pin from Jim before they torch his home. The gangsters then, at that point, set up for business close by where one of Mauricio's men tracks Jim's MasterCard data. Jim stops at a corner store and gets a map book to get to Chicago. Not long after they leave, Mauricio and his men stop at the corner store where he threatens the service station representative, Golden Midhunter, that kept an eye on Jim. He takes a gander at security film to track down him prior to killing the representative, and they keep on seeking after. Jim gets nourishment for himself and Miguel prior to getting back to the street, yet the truck stalls from overheating. He stops at a clothes-buy shop and uses cash to get it fixed while dozing in the truck for the evening. Miguel takes Jackson out for a walk and uses a cache to get supplies. Sarah has additionally become mindful of what Jim has done and reaches him to return Miguel, yet he focuses on that the circumstance is last chance. In the wake of getting back to the street, Jim is pulled over by an officer, Vic Browder, who requests that he get out of the vehicle after he takes his weapons. The officer professes to need to converse with Miguel, however Jim sees the man chatting on the telephone to another person. Whenever Jim calls attention to this to the officer, he rapidly acknowledges he is working under the cartel and that he has sold them out. The officer takes out his firearm on Jim, yet Jackson chomps his arm and assists Jim with overwhelming him. Jim takes the officer out and goes with Miguel and Jackson to stow away as Mauricio and the others drop by. Subsequent to seeing that their objectives have escaped, he kills the officer and they take Jim's firearms. Jim stops at a weapons store to get more firearms and later stops at an inn for the night in the wake of reasoning it was protected since he didn't utilize his card. Mauricio and his hooligans kill the inn assistant prior to going to track down Jim and Miguel. He gets the kid and conceals in the wake of alarming the police. They conceal long and adequate number before the police show up, however Mauricio sees Jackson and shoots him prior to leaving. Jim gets his canine's body and gives him a legitimate entombment in the first part of the day. Jim feels that he ought to simply return Miguel to Mexico, yet after one more talk with Sarah, he concludes he needs to complete the task. Sarah even chooses to cover for himself and not let her associates know where Jim is going. Jim and Miguel stop out and about for the night where Jim tells Miguel the best way to utilize a firearm, and they likewise consume the cartel cash to remain warm. Approaching their objective, Jim sees Mauricio and his thugs have tracked down them and are drawing near. Jim figures out how to shake them momentarily to give him sufficient opportunity to get a spot to kill them. He shoots the driver and makes their van crash prior to taking Miguel to conceal on a close-by ranch. He shoots the most youthful part before Mauricio and the other part follow. Miguel makes a redirection to permit Jim to shoot the last part before Mauricio pursues them. He tracks down Miguel and holds him at gunpoint to draw Jim to him. He tells Jim he intends to enroll Miguel as a kid warrior as was he, in any event, attempting to get Miguel to pull the trigger on Jim himself. Utilizing what he gained from Jim, Miguel purges the magazine and has Jim battle Mauricio. He gets cut simultaneously, however when Miguel gets the firearm, he hands it to Jim, and he shoots Mauricio in the stomach. He passes on him the firearm with one shot to give him his next decision. Mauricio gives Jim his award back, and Jim and Miguel hear Mauricio direct the firearm back toward himself as they leave. Jim strolls Miguel to his family's home in Chicago, and they are cheerful to see him. Jim vanishes and goes on a transport, where he sees the cut injuries once more. He hangs over and shuts his eyes.
Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing.